So Dominic, thank you for having me, and folks, thank you for letting me do this again. Let me try to find that little projector thing. There we go. And I wanted to just give you an overview. The mistake I made was I thought it was chapters 29 to 40, so I'm missing the 28. Forgive me for that. And I wanted to give you a quick introduction, a brief plot recap, run through the chapters, make sure we all remember some of the big details, and then go over a couple of the major themes and appreciation of Trollope's language, which has always impressed me. I know he's thought of as a writer who didn't do a whole lot of rewrites, and he wasn't like the modernists who were, jumping on every syllable, but he has a fluid, beautiful style. I wanted to just look at one or two pieces real closely, and then some discussion questions for the small group. So by the introduction, I want to just mention the structure, where we're really working with two kind of big stories, the dual intertwined stories. We have the Duke and Duchess on one side and the political side of things, and then Ferdinand Lopez and the Whartons on the other side. And the thing that I liked is they not only intertwine, but the parallel stories grow organically from the characterization. The plot doesn't really happen. It's not like you can, like sometimes you think of, I don't know, sometimes in a TV show or a movie, you'll go, oh man, I can see the writers sitting around in the writers' room going, let's make them do this and see what happens. And with Trollope, it kind of just, it organically grows out of the characters. And you never have the feeling that anything was artificially imposed. So the plot recap, we'll go through real fast. I started with 29, forgive me. The two candidates for the election, of course, is Arthur Fletcher and Ferdinand Lopez. This is mostly a Lopez chapter, and he finds out he's going to have no Duchess help in the election. The Duke has come down on this and wants to go with the new way of doing things and have the people make the choice. And I think we begin to see Lopez's isolation begin, which is a theme that's going to come up over and over in these chapters. He becomes more isolated, and maybe the beginnings of seeing him becoming more desperate. In chapter 30, Yes, a Lie, he scrapes together a dinner party, which is not really, he's trying to put on a show, and it's not going as well as it would be if he were a little more authentic. And this is the chapter 2 where we find out that Fletcher is going to be the opponent, and he says to Emily, well, I beat him once, I can do it again. And Emily begins her awakening of that this guy, her new husband, is not exactly what she had thought he was. It's just a tiny beginning, a tiny seed, but it gets her thinking, I didn't quite like that way of putting things. She gets the letter from Arthur Fletcher in a very gentlemanly way saying, I'm running against your husband. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it when I started, and I can't. And she thinks it's, as it is, a very kind and thoughtful letter. But Lopez explodes, and he tells her that she's a child and she really can. And she kind of tells him times, listen, I don't understand business. I don't get this politics thing. And he's always telling her, you're a child. I will shape you. I will learn. I will teach you, and you can learn from me. 31, Yes for the Horsewhip. This is where she's told to think what her husband tells her. And she says, I don't think that's the way marriage is supposed to work, but I guess I have to obey. I took the vows. And Emily, again, in this chapter, another layer comes on where she's realizing that Lopez is not quite a gentleman, which is what her father had warned her against. And then Lopez is off to Silverbridge to try to work in the election. We switch now in chapter 32 over to the Duke and Duchess, and there we have a little bit of a parallel with Lopez and Emily, because the Duke has told Lady Glenn to not interfere with the election. And I'm sorry, did I just to not interfere with the election. And she did she said, okay, I won't. And she goes in and talks to Mr. Sprugeon and mentions that, I do like that guy. And it becomes quite a scene between the Duke and Duchess. And this idea is the same problem that's going on between, or not a problem, but the same issue that's going on between Emily and Lopez. A wife's obedience is happening now with the Duke and Duchess on another level. And they have a bit of a blow up, and the Duchess walks out of the room. And but in this one, the Duke kind of rethinks things, and he goes to see her and talk to her. And there's that Latin quote, which I did not write down. I did look it up. It's like, uh, let let justice reign, though the heavens may fall. And then the quote that is going through the Duke's mind, let proper subordination from his wife be done, and let the heavens fall, or let the heavens fall. So he's thinking this idea of a wife's obedience to her husband is an important foundation of marriage and of our society, and he doesn't know what to do because he doesn't like the idea of the scene that's just happened, and he's thinking maybe I'm not right. This is the scene too where she says, I think this is the chapter where she says, "No wife likes to be scolded. Nobody likes to be treated disrespectfully," and he's sensitive to that, whereas Lopez would not be. These two, this marriage is a foil, I think, for the other marriage, and we get to see where we see Lopez really doing things, you know, in a in an unkind way and in a way that's thoughtless of his wife. Here we're seeing what the other side could be. In 33, A Man Should Not Howl, we have a scene between Arthur and his brother. Arthur, with the pain of the loss of Emily and all this that's been going on with him, he's really having a tough time with it. And he goes out and does some rash horseback riding, which is not only rash, but maybe dangerous. And he and his brother have a discussion about how a man is supposed to handle disappointment. And it's a wonderful chapter. The discussion between the two brothers is it's a short chapter, but it's absolutely charming. And he tells he tells Arthur, a man should not howl. Like even though you're in pain, it's that idea of the gentleman. You don't make things uncomfortable for other people. You have a responsibility and you have pride in your own behavior. So you can be feeling tremendous pain on the inside, but be careful of how you show it. Then we get to the thrilling chapter of the Silver Bridge election. A lot of stuff going on in here. We meet Frank Gresham again, who, if my memory serves me, is our old friend from Dr. Thorne, um, which is interesting if I am right. He was in a sort of a horsewhip situation himself in that previous Palliser novel. And we also meet Frank is helping Arthur and in the election, and the two of them are working the neighborhoods and all. And we also meet Mr. Dubois, the third candidate, who's absolutely wonderful. He's the local guy, and he changed his name to a more charming sounding one. But he's an interesting character, but he's very brief. He's in there to kind of make a complication for the two mainstays. And what happens, and this is also the chapter where there's the encounter between Arthur and Lopez in the street, where Arthur holds out his hand to shake as a gentleman would, and Lopez, I think, puts his arms akimbo, hands on his hips to make sure that he sees he's not going to extend a hand, and then turns on his heel and walks away. They're just standing there, and Frank Gresham, I think, the quote to Arthur is, "He's not a gentleman and does not know how to behave himself." And this idea of, again, there's this threading. It's almost like a weaving of these themes. This theme of the gentleman, and doesn't know how to behave himself, keeps going through. Like people, we saw it with the Duke, where he was accosted at his own party and asked about a political job. Someone didn't know how to behave, and it caused a real problem. So then, with Mr. Dubois in the election, there's pressure for Lopez to withdraw. They're saying, if you withdraw, maybe I can have your people, and the extra can put us over, and we can stop Arthur. And at one point, it might be Frank Gresham again. We started to see Lopez's anger get the better of him. He could not guide himself by reason. He was so upset about things. And we've got the letter, the stick, the encounter, and the constable, where they end up going to straighten things out at a local courtroom. The next thing, Lopez goes back to London. Let's see if I get that. And Lopez sees Emily and then her father. Then he sees Sexty Parker and then Everett. And we begin to see Lopez really starting to break bad, as they say in the modern parlay. He um, he begins to become very manipulative and sees openings. He starts to worm his way into things. And he sees an opening where when he finds out Everett and his father have become a little bit alienated, Lopez's isolation starts continues. He and Emily are starting to feel, he's lost the election, he's come back, and he's thinking, okay, everything that I had before and all my plans from before are no good. So he's recalculating. And then he becomes manipulative and he starts a journey down that dark road. One that's even he's thinking about maybe if I can separate Everett from his father, I can become the new son. The Jolly Blackbird is the place where Mr. Wharton and Arthur meet, and Mr. Wharton tries to tell him that it's what's going on with him. And we're starting to see Mr. Wharton become weaker and more isolated. Arthur's excited about the new bill. He's the new member of the House of Commons. But we see Mr. Wharton really starting to take a step back, which we'll see him take another step up in a second. The Horns is a great chapter. It's the party. But we get in here where the Duchess begins to self-reflect. Her husband has given her a hard time about all this public display of social connections that he's not comfortable with, and he's not comfortable with it personally because his personality does not work that way, but he's also not comfortable with it in terms of the the honor and dignity of the office of both a duke and of a prime minister. He's thinking that this is I think he tries to hold himself back from using the term vulgar, but he does say the word vulgar, and he says, "Yeah, vulgar is not the right word," but it escapes from his lips. And Lady Glen is hurt. I mean, she's upset, she's angry, and it's a tough one. So in this chapter, she's starting to think, "Gee, was it vulgar? Did I do the right thing?" Like she had the right intentions, trying to help her husband. At this party, we get the confrontation between Arthur and Lopez, where they see each other and they do kind of make a social salve over it. I don't think they shake. They won't shake hands, but they kind of nod to each other. And then Emily and Lopez leave right away. Lopez wants to take her right away, and they have a confrontation where Lopez is saying, you're here to obey me. There's nobody else that you should be thinking about. And he's upset about it. And I don't know, at this point, I'm not sure if Lopez really thinks, I think for him, it's a thing of pride. I don't think he's really jealous. I don't think he thinks that Emily has any, leftover feelings. Yeah, he knows Arthur has feelings, but I don't think he feels endangered romantically. I think it's just a matter of his pride that Emily is his. This is another thing on the marriage theme, that Emily is his property. And he even says to her at some point uh, about her father, if I told you to do something that your father didn't want you to do, you're mine. He's nothing to you now. Like I'm the guy. So, and again, Emily is thinking, oh my gosh, this isn't what I was thinking about when I said yes to this. So their confrontation is another step on the incremental layering of the isolation, the realization, the epiphany that Emily's going through, and the manipulations that Lopez is starting. He's going down a path toward what might be called evil. So Orlando retires. He has the political error of overestimating his own strength, and in a way, maybe that's mirroring Lopez's overestimating. He's going to start trying to move in and politically maneuver this family. And there's also a little discussion in here about the price of public life. The Duke is a public man by his station, but he's not a public man by his personality. And he talks about his enslavement to the to the job, to his duty, that it's not something he enjoys. And then at the end of this chapter, we get a look at Slide and his cheap journalism. Chapter 39 is a real turning point. The "get round him" line comes in here. Lopez is angry, but then he controls it when it suits him. He realizes he's going to talk to his wife about talking to her father, and he knows he's low on money, so he's got to do something. So he loses the anger and starts manipulating Emily to work on her father. And Lopez's lack of self-awareness, when he says to Emily things like, "Men above 70 are apt to die," and she's just shocked. She's like, "Oh my God! Well, I know that. We don't have to say it out loud. We don't have to hope for it." And when he says the line, "Get round him," that's the way to handle old people like that. Emily starts to realize that he's unworthy of her love. And something really neat happens here with Emily. She's realizing her situation. She she suddenly realizes how alone she is and that she's married to a monster in a way. It was very Hitchcockian for me. It was like a Hitchcock movie where the one character sees another character and goes, "Oh my gosh, I didn't." It's almost like well, I don't want to say horror element. That might be over dramatizing, but it was more than suspense. It was more than I didn't feel sorry for Emily. It was that I was scared for her, and I think she's a little scared too. And then finally, we have Come and Try It. Lopez is thinking these rooms are killing him financially. He's out of money, and he comes up with the idea, or Emily says, I think he Emily says, "Well, I'd like to go see my father and just, you know, hang out with him for a little bit, make sure he's okay." And Lopez jumps on that and goes, "Yes, we can move in with him. That would be great. I can give up these rooms." And he's completely honest with her. He doesn't see Emily as any kind of threat that he has to lie to or anything. And he says, "Yes, I want you to work on him. Like you get in there and really start, you can say this to him and you can say it this way and use this tone of voice." And Emily's just horrified. And now she's also thinking there's a little part in there about a young bride and how she's buying things for the new house and there are all these little treasures. Now she's realizing she's got to give them up. When they go and tell Mr. Wharton, he's got his suspicions. And he immediately looks at Emily with a suspicious eye. And then I think she says something, and she knows that it's a, it's not a good thing that they're doing. It's not what her father would want. And she's kind of innocent of any bad intentions. And he senses that, he realizes that. So after dinner, Mr. Wharton makes things clear to Lopez that he wants, listen, we're going to be this way. There'll be dinner for you. This is part of her, treasure, and no false pretension. No, no fooling around. I'm going to be totally direct with you. And then Mr. Wharton felt bad about the fact that maybe his daughter, he was really missing his daughter. And I think we're seeing Mr. Wharton as someone who's becoming more isolated. His daughter has been lost to him a little bit. Everett is feeling lost to him, which makes Lopez's manipulating that separation even more horrible and evil. Like it's just a terrible thing. Then a couple of themes. Obviously, the marriage theme and the relations between husbands and wives, the questions of obedience, which I think have been in our time. I think the vow of obedience is gone now. It used to be, if I remember this correctly, I think only the wife had, had the vow of obedience, which worked out for one half of the marriage parties. But I think, I guess you could put it back in if you want, but I think that's pretty much in the past. And then the idea in marriage is the idea of condescension and power versus respect. That little scene between the Duke and Duchess was a wonderful scene where they had the blow up. And then there's this moment where the Duke is such a wonderful character. He's just one of the greatest characters in, Trollope for me. He rethinks his situation and realizes that I guess that the Duchess was working only for him, and that he goes back and talks to her again, and that's when they have that thing where he says, I don't want to feel, I don't want us to be separated," and she thinks it's literal, and he says, "No, no, no, I wouldn't even think of that. I mean, even just spiritually, just our relationship." The idea of a gentleman floats all through this. Arthur versus Lopez. And there's a couple of great scenes where Emily, as she's going through her awakening, is realizing her dad was right, and that there's a difference between Arthur's manliness and what she calls deportment or behavior. You're not a gentleman just because you can act like a gentleman, or the right manners. It comes from within. Um, One of the big themes for me in these chapters was isolation and alienation. Lopez, you see getting more and more isolated, but not just him. Everett, Emily's brother, is getting more isolated from his dad. Emily is feeling so totally alone. She's married to this guy that she can't relate to anymore. She's being separated from her father. Mr. Warden, who's being separated from his two children, and even the Duke when he talked about separation with the Duchess. And I don't want to read too much into this psychologically, but I know that I think I remember that Trollope's earliest years, his childhood was really plagued by isolation and uh, going to a school where he wasn't really valued and fully respected. And then a final theme, superficial values versus intrinsic values. Like what's on the surface. Lopez is all surface. He wants the brougham because he doesn't want to give that up because it looks good. Other things they can give up, but that's something on the outside. But he has no substance. We don't even know, like Mr. Warren keeps saying, I don't even know what your business is. It reminded me of Melmotte, if those of you remember the Way We Live Now. And the Duke too. The Duke has a problem where he talks about mock work. Like he has this real substance of real gifts that he can use to help the country, and it's almost like his position puts him in a spot where he has to pretend. There's no policy. He's just trying to keep things together, and the idea that we'll take things. And he complains about mock work, and I think he was much happier when he was in the um, House of Commons and he was working on his decimal stuff. I want to mention language real quickly. The structure, or his linguistic skills, his novel skills, the structure having the two plots reflecting each other, I thought was wonderful. I thought Trollope's use of language and spacing and timing over the novel, where it's not like this big explosion where somebody has this intense moment, like chapter by chapter. It's just like the pebbles dropping on the things or drops of water, and it just builds. Like Lopez doesn't go mad or angry all at once. It's like incremental moments, and we can see it in like with Lopez, where it goes from Arthur's letter to the horsewhip to the treatment of Emily, and then to the manipulation of Mr. Wharton, the rooms, the money, separating him from Everett. So I thought that the timing, I thought what Trollope does over these long novels is he really brings things in very slowly and just at the right amount of time. It's almost like a musician, like not too fast, but he keeps it going. Another thing I loved in language was the inner workings of the mind. Um, and I think I have a thing here. This is from Emily, if you don't mind me reading a quick. This is from, I think, chapter 39. This is in the carriage on the way to Mr. Wharton. Fernando Lopez is telling her, I want you to manipulate him this way, And she says, all this horrified her, but he did not see her horror. How utterly ignorant he was of the very nature of her mind and disposition, to be told by her husband that she was to get round her father. And then after the suggestion of the rooms, she understood the meaning of this. She could read his mind so far. She endeavored not to read the book too closely, but there it was, open to her wider day by day, and she knew that the lessons which were taught were vulgar and damnable. And yet she had to hide from him her own perception of himself. She had to sympathize with his desires, and yet to abstain from doing that which his desires demanded from her. And there you can see, like in Trollope's language, it's almost modern psychological insight. It's not stream of consciousness, but he's inside her mind telling us what it feels like to be Emily at that moment. And then the last thing, and you guys all know this, I'm just bringing up a couple things that you know from all the books we've read. They're all wonderful, and there's so many examples of this. But Trollope's use of dialogue is just absolutely great. It floors me every time. So from chapter 32, this is the Duke and Duchess, when the Duke rethinks things and he goes back and talks to her, if you'll forgive me for a sec. What am I to do? This is Glencora. What am I to do when you scold me? You must know pretty well by this time that I don't like being scolded. I desire you not to speak to Mr. Sprungen. As she repeated his words, she imitated his manner and voice closely. I shouldn't dream of addressing the children with such magnificence of anger. What business is it of yours? No woman likes that sort of thing, and I'm not sure I'm acquainted with any woman who likes it much less than Glencora, Duchess of Omnium. As she said these words in a low whisper, she courtesied down to the ground. It can go on a little bit, but I don't want to run too long on the opening thing here. There are 100 moments of dialogue. that are just delightful and smart and incisive. He's just great. Finally, the questions for the small groups. If you need anything to get you started, that you might have stuff on your own, that's fine. Is Mr. Wharton guilty of creating the situation that encouraged Lopez to break bad? Mr. Wharton really, he didn't want Lopez, and he's kind of, I can't say put the squeeze. I gave him 3,000 pounds. He gave 500 toward the thing, but he also is he's made Lopez a bit of an outsider. Lopez is not accepted by Mr. Wharton the way Arthur Fletcher would have been. And I don't know if that's, it's no excuse, but I don't know if that's a motivator for Lopez. Second question might be, what do men and women owe one another in a marriage? Uh, we see a couple marriages here that show very different ways of relating to one another and helping or not helping each other. What's the difference between honor and pride? Uh, Arthur certainly has honor and pride. How are those two things different? I think Lopez has a lot of pride, and it hurts him. And Arthur has a strong sense of honor. I don't see it hurting him. But if you, those are two words that they're not interchangeable. And what is the difference? And then the final thing on that public-private question, was the Duchess wrong or in error? Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, to work so hard on the public side for her husband's success. So just a couple things if you need one to get you started. And Dominic, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. And folks, thank you for always being there every 2 weeks.